So today we are doing chapter 3, day 2, which is going to be the slope of a line. So it's something you're familiar with from Algebra 1, and that we're going to use a little bit this year in geometry as well, and then definitely again next year at Algebra 2. So we just want a little refresher here that the slope of a line is the difference in the change along the y-axis to the x-axis between 2 points on the line. So let's say let's go with rate of change along the y-axis to the x-axis between the 2 points on the line, and it's the difference. So it's the difference in the y. And remember, we used subscripts once before this year. That just means you have your second point and your first point, and you're distinguishing between the two. And then that's going to be x2 minus x1. So you guys might remember that as rise over run. So the change in your y's over the change in your x. So we're going to find the slope of this line. You can take the additional step to call this my first point, so x1, y1, and x2, y2. So you're just going to use the formula here. So our slope, n, it's just a letter variable we use to say slope, is going to be -2. I underlined it to show that I used it, minus 4. And then we have 1 minus -1, so it's going to be a plus. And when I do slope, it's going to be a fraction. It's okay to leave it as a fraction if that's the case, but you do want to simplify wherever possible. So in this one, my slope is just going to be -3. So if we were plotting this on a line, we would go up 3 and then to the left 1. Here's another one. Again, I just need to take my first y and then my second y and subtract them, take their difference, and then my first x, going back to that original one, and subtract my second. And I have -3 minus 2 is -5. But down below, I get 0. So remember, anytime we have 0 in a denominator, that's going to be undefined, because we can't do that. Slope of 0 is okay, so if you have 0 in the numerator and a number below, that's just going to be the slope of 0. So how do we remember which one is our slope? So we have positive slopes, we have negative slopes, we have undefined, and we have 0. So remember that I use something called Mr. Slope Guy here. So Mr. Slope Guy has 2 eyeballs, he's kind of winking at us. He has positive and he has negative. Those are 2 kinds of slopes that we have. Our positive slope goes up and to the right. Our negative slope goes up to the left or down to the right. So kind of think of this is positive and this is negative, okay? 0 slope looks like this. It's his little mouth here. He's kind of a clown. He's kind of like a sad little guy, Mr. Slope Guy. So 0 slope is our horizontal line, but he does need a nose here. So whenever our line looks like this, we're going to call that undefined, the U for undefined there. Okay, so for our positive slope, that is any time that x is greater than or equal to 0, not 1, sorry about that, 0. We have our negative slope, where our m is going to be less than 0. What am I doing today? It should be m, because m is what we use for slope. It'll be 0. Our undefined is anytime you have some sort of number over 0 versus 0 slope is going to be 0 over some number. Okay? And then 0 slope, remember, this is the whole point of the picture here, but 0 slope is our horizontal line, and undefined slope is our vertical line. Would it pass that vertical line test? Let's graph a few lines here. You're going to want a straight edge of some sort. I know we all don't carry rulers around with us, so as long as you use like the side for binder, or if you have really good drawing between connecting 2 points, maybe even just use the side of your phone. One of the skills I'm going to require that you guys know how to do is just graph a line that passes through a certain point with a certain slope. It's kind of like graphing lines. So we're going to go from 4 to -3, like graphing lines off of the equation. So 4, -3, that's the point that it needs to go through. And then this is going to give me my slope. So remember, it's rise over run. It's the change in your y and then your x. So I'm gonna go down 3, that's what it's telling me to do, and then over 2. All you need to draw a line is 2 points, but in this case, if you want to be able to draw it all the way through and you don't have a good straight edge nearby, you can always do some more points here. So I'm going to go up 3, over 2. And then you're going to connect those lines, like I said, with that straight edge. And that's all I'm going to ask you to do. So just knowing when you're done, double check this was a negative slope. It's going up and to the left, down to the right, so it is a negative slope. I find it's really helpful just to draw Mr. Slope Guide like in the corner of all your papers, and then you can always double check that way as well. So this is one of the skills you're going to need for your practice today, as well as thinking about parallel lines. So parallel lines are non-vertical lines that are the same slope, and they're considered parallel. So all vertical lines are parallel because they're all going to have the same slope no matter what. The symbol, and we've been using this all year, the symbol for parallel just looks like that, kind of 2 slanted lines next to each other. So they want us to graph the line through this point that is parallel to this line. So we're going to have to both graph this point and this line. So let's do the point first, -1, 3. Okay, so it's waiting for us to draw its line. We need to graph this line. If you want to do that in standard form, you can. If you're still comfortable just graphing in slope-intercept form, you can change that form for you. So my line is y equals -1/4 x minus 1. So I'm going to graph that. I'm starting at -1, that's my y-intercept, and I'm going to graph the slope of -1/4. So that's up 1, and then to the left 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or down 1, right 4. It's kind of the same direction. So here's my first line. It wants me to graph the line parallel to it that's going to go through here, which means I need to borrow the same slope. So my slope is still -1/4. So down 1 over 4, up 1 over 4. And there I have 2 parallel lines. All right? So that's the steps you'll follow to do problems like that. Every time we talk about parallel lines, we usually want to talk about perpendicular lines. Perpendicular lines have a different symbol. We've used that as well. Looks like this, and those are going to be lines that meet in a 90-degree angle. What you might remember from Algebra 1 is that perpendicular, if their product of their slopes equal -1. So in order for that to happen, you need to take opposite and reciprocal. So if I have one slope that is x over y, then my new slope, so I'll call that m2, is going to be -y over 6. You want to maybe make yourself a note opposite, so changing the sign, and reciprocal, so flipping that fraction. So now they want us to go through the point 4, 2, so graph that point. And then it wants to be perpendicular. I always underline or circle that just to remind myself that's what I'm going to do. They want us to graph this line here. So 2x plus 4y equals 8. I'm going to graph this one using standard form just as a reminder. What I'm going to do is say when y is 0, x would be 4. So when y is 0, x is 4. And when x is 0, y is 2. So here is my line. And so we can do that off of the picture. And now I can test my slope myself here, because I can see that I'm going from one point to the next. I'm going down 1 over 2. So this would be -1/2. If you didn't do it this way, maybe you want to turn it into y-intercept form, because then you'll see your slope. So 2x plus 4y equals 8. 4y equals -2x plus 8. And then divide both sides by 4. So you get y equals -1/2 x plus 2. So again, this is where I'm going to pull my slope from. So you can do it from the picture, or you can do it from here. Now we're not going to go parallel to it this time. We want perpendicular. So if my original slope was -1/2, my new slope, we need to flip it upside down, so it would be 2 over 1, or just 2, and I'm going to change the sign. So it was negative, so now it's positive. So my new slope is just 2. So I'm going to go up 2 over 1, down 2 over 1. And when you're done, the picture should look like there would be a right angle in there, and that all four corners would be a right angle. You want to make sure that you're not going to eyeball anything and that you're truly getting the answer that you need to use. So use these notes and the what you remember last year from Algebra 1 and try the examples provided to you.